Welcome to Teatro Absurdo with Huilo Marvavilla, brought to you by Jaguar Bridge Productions and The Great Mystery. Well, hello there, podcasters. Welcome to Teatro Absurdo. I'm Huilo Marvavilla, and this is Series 3. Welcome aboard to that which is ludicrous, preposterous, crazy, and, if you're lucky, Hi there, I'm Huilo Marvavilla with Jaguar Bridge Productions and Teatro Absurdo. Today we have a little special podcasting with my beautiful dear ally, Ava Gracie Warrender, aka the artist known as Prsephne, musician, songwriter, composer, magician. Let's go. So, Gracie, what we're talking about today is we're all going to New York City soon to celebrate indie film, right? And the music and the art and how money is made to produce them and just all these fantastic things. So in these videos, I want to just show people what it's like backstage, how artists are devoted to such things in spite of not knowing the outcome, taking risks. So this said, do you want to talk about a little bit about how not we first met, but when we started that very amazing little conversation in Columbus, Ohio, about you participating in an indie film? Anything that inspired you or just said, yeah, I'm going to go?
Yeah. I mean, I studied film in college, and a lot of my experience, like working with films and being on set and all that, was in like student film kind of organizations and working with my peers. And there was just a magic to that. Like, trying to make the coolest thing that you can on a really strict budget with like strict deadlines and like just making it happen and like honoring the creativity of the people around us and all that everyone could bring to the project with their skills and with their own visions as well. And so I really loved the camaraderie of that. And I graduated in 2020 straight into the pandemic. Everything was shut down. LA was not, I was going to move to Los Angeles, but it was like not functioning as business as usual in the industry. So it's kind of lost. And when you started speaking to me about this idea, I felt like I was starting to realize that like the traditional route of going to LA, working as an assistant, being in the studios, like that wasn't even like possibly going to be a reality anymore. And the more and more I thought about it, the more I'm like, this feels a lot closer to like what I loved about making art with my film friends in school. And so I was like, let's do it.
Awesome. And just as a sidebar, I mean, the coolest thing about this too is, how different artists connect in different ways. And I know your mother for a million years and your aunt, and both of them were amazing in that they created the connection, that spark, that moment. And you said yes. And the yes was, I will go to Costa Rica, unknowing anything about anything. So we flew you down on a little Cessna. So do you want to just share a moment about what it was like to come into Costa Rica for the first time?
Yeah. So going to Costa Rica was like the first time I'd ever been to like Central America. First time I've been to like Latin America at all. And so it was like a big jump in terms of experiencing a new culture and a new place. And it was such a beautiful place. Like, first off, just getting to be so close to nature and experience just like driving around the countryside and seeing all the natural beauty was like really incredible. And I think what was super nice is I always think it's great when you're traveling somewhere and you can experience it more so from people who live on the land and understand what the culture is like by being like it being their home. And so kind of getting a more inside look at what day-to-day life actually looks like for people who live there. That was a really interesting and an interesting experience. And probably like the biggest thing kind of I learned was like that just the cultural exchange that comes from being more embedded into local life versus tourist life. And I think that also was just like an interesting perspective to gain in terms of then working on this film and the subject matter. And it is more about unmasking what you see beyond the tourist industry. And so it was cool to have like a little bit more of chance to experience that by staying there for a longer time and being outside of like the main cities as well.
Fantastic. And there's a couple things in that one, you speak to getting to know the local energy. And I think, some of it was almost startling. I mean, we talk about this a couple times, but our beautiful dear friend, Luis Cruz, who is a Tico, Costa Rican, was kind of on board a lot of it indirectly and directly. But there's something, what catalyzes this film and its important and its urgency is that it's telling living stories of people in a celebrated democracy, a celebrated ecotourism destination. It's sharing things that just, aren't said publicly. And I think I want to just go to this one experience that I get emotional sometimes, but was so potent about racism and about that Costa Rica may not have a military, but they have crazy police checkpoints, random all the time. They harass people all the time. And we were driving rather gaily to the biggest town nearby. And bam, there was a police checkpoint just around the corner for nothing. And it was so interesting to watch, and just a slight response from you. What I remember is, they went to me and like, I'm the driver and I'm like, okay, here I am. And then they went around to you and they bypassed us both. And they immediately went to Luis in the back seat, asked to look in his bag, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, wow, they went to the brownest person in the car. And that's a Costa Rican cop.
Yeah.
So how did that speak to the work in this film, you as a visitor, and just what the hell is really going on? I mean, any touch points?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting I feel like at the time too, kind of coming out of the climate of how institutionalized racism was being explored and called out in the United States, just kind of coming out of 2020 and stuff, that definitely was something that was fresh in my mind. And seeing something that felt so blatantly targeting was really shocking and eye-opening. And yeah, it does kind of attest to the fact that like a lot of places, not just Costa Rica, you're going to have like certain areas where it's like people come in and they get the most amazing like curated experience of what the country is going to be. And then you go outside of that and you go to a place where people just live their lives, and you start to see some more of that like crumble a bit. And I mean, I experienced the same thing in Los Angeles. You see they clean up the city for nice things, and then some days you're seeing all the people that are living on the streets. And so it's, in some ways I was like, it was shocking, and in some ways it was familiar, which is kind of sad. But yeah, it definitely was scary for me in the moment, having a confrontation of sorts with police in a foreign country. definitely like scary. But it was strange to watch them question both of you also as like more masculine presenting people and skip over like the woman in the car and then go straight to Luis. So it definitely like showed me just like a blatant demonstration of like how privileges can play into situations like that. And yeah, it was definitely like it's an experience I'll never forget.
Right. So as we move into the discussion about indie filmmaking, one of the things I've been chatting with people that are participating in this film is it requires a tremendous amount of intuition, dedication, devotion that's just sometimes not normal. And I know for me personally, when you came to Costa Rica, it was out of context for me because a lot of people come down there and I'm the tour guide and making sure they have that curated experience to some degree. But I also knew that what was going on at that moment, the film had already been started a little bit through our friends Finton and Daniel, is that I needed to focus on the work with you. Mm-hmm. And one thing that I remind people all over, that artisan residencies around the world, which I had created in Costa Rica, are so different. Some of them are really focused on a project and you have to prove that to even get there, or they cost you a ton of money, or they're basically, this may get edited, a fuck fest, whatever. But it's, so you came down and you were kind of isolated in your beautiful tower. Mm-hmm. And then we started to work. And this is what I want to really speak to because, there are so many ways people can plug in. Like I just spoke with Lucia, she's heavily involved in the composition of theme songs. Daniel, very involved with early footage, with the idea of making a documentary, but then that got bagged. And then Finton, who's been a very live support of grabbing footage on the fly with me wherever I am. But one of the things I enjoyed so much with you was it was a time for really deep visionary discussion and example and just tool making on like how to make documentary more art house film. Because I'm seeing, I get so many people who comment about documentary. Everybody's making a documentary, and rightfully so, because it's one way we can get our news in a world where, the mainstream media is horrific on all sides, overly opinionated, trying to sell, product on some level. And then there's indie media and indie documentary. So you and I were to and froing, and anything you want to speak to, and I'm just going to note a few things here, and please expand upon them. But some of the things I remember is you would bounce down to me, in the collective kitchen, and you'd be like, I was thinking about a doppelganger, how to bring in Jaguarella as like a higher spirit voice, how to bring in different, I can't remember what they call them, but these cards, these ways people put either quotes to move a documentary forward or whatever. But we were looking at, how to utilize the tarot deck that I had created. You came down and said, well, why don't we look at, these scenes that were not filmed, like the kidnapping or the arsons, or these things to utilize your marionettes or puppetry. Do you want to speak to how you felt motivated to encourage and get behind, moving documentary into something much more magical, much more intriguing in its storytelling nature, and the freedom to do so in indie documentary making? there.
Yes. Well, I think already before I came to Costa Rica, like I was familiar with some of your art just from through the years, both your visual art, the fact that you would do shows and all these different things. And I don't know, I think it just after being in Costa Rica, in the residency, in the building that was just covered with the art, there's a specific energy to that. And I just felt like it would be a disservice to this film to not be able to integrate the magic and witchcraft of sorts of your art and the place itself into the film. And so, and I think also there's a sense of there's a charm to it that needed to be captured. And being able to bring that in through puppetry, through Jaguarella, through these different aspects of art that are not necessarily traditional to documentary filmmaking, it felt like you would understand and grasp the severity of the darkness and the destruction and everything that came to follow. And so I think actually getting to be in person in our creative space and like seeing just in nature and seeing all the beauty that was there, it really like made it clear to me that like this isn't just like this is more special than just like a documentary telling a story about crime or this or that or the other thing. Like there is a heart to it and it needed to come through.
Right. And this is something, I want to express to people out there watching is that what I'm understanding from developing an independent film like this is that, what you were expressing to me and bringing in all these things, bringing in the charm and stuff is, there are ways. One thing is trying to express to people what was lost in Costa Rica, and that you're trying to go in and reach the heart of the viewer to get them invested in the story, right? And that it's another horror in Central America or Latin America or wherever in the world. But I think one of the things I was conveying to you and others working on this film, I said this has to be fun. This has to be not like discounting the horrors that went on, but I said I didn't want that to be like the central aspect, another crimes story. I mean, Jesus, will these streaming channels get over that and move beyond, or at least try to have fun with their audience and dissipate this algorithmic addiction? And so I think, in indie film, and I think, you came down with great risk, and we continue on now. I want to bring this forward to where you are now as an artist and involved with this film, because, as I've expressed to different people, the difference with making a film like this, feature film, or if it moves over magically to docuseries, is these things take a long time. And I was not ready for that, honestly. And I used to get mad at people that would like look at me and say, well, this is going to take a while. And I was like, no, I want it done tomorrow. So this isn't a TikTok vanity thing. This is something that it's multidimensional, multi-layered. And it could take us another 2 or 3 years to actually get this out. But in that, you just came out of an amazing, schooling or increasing your talents and skills and creativity. If I can mention the school, it's not important, but you do that. Do you want to speak to how what you just went through in your education process, how it keeps you even more motivated to continuing to participate in this film? So now we're going to move to your sound experience.
Yeah.
Anything on that?
Totally.
as
So,
a musician?
yeah, so I'd say my main artistic focus at the moment is my music projects, mostly with my Persephone kind of artist moniker. And but also beyond that, like I think, I had a basis for the importance of sound and film from my experience in film school, but I think getting to dive deeper into it and the emotion that is carried through in sound and music, it's like almost it's very essential to a film, and like that is really intriguing to me how you can see seeing images and completely change the way that they're perceived by an audience based on the sound that's accompanying them. And I think that kind of even speaking to what you were speaking on before about not just another crime film, like there is something that's really important, I think, about capturing the joy and the beauty in this story as well. And not having it just be all doom and gloom, because there is a lot of like beautiful moments that I think are examined in the film, and like beautiful friendships and connection across different cultures and ages and everything like that. And so I think that both in the imagery and in the sound, I've been able to kind of have a sense of both sides of those with this project and with this film. And I that's really intriguing to me, just to see how that narrative can continue being pushed through in the compositions for the film.
Right. And one of the things I had discussed with you, I think, is that I am very well aware of how music is really important to this film for many, many reasons, both culturally, and I want to add this and emphasize it, but the relevance of the film. And I think this is a challenge, and it's a fun challenge. And, as I work with Lucia, and of course, DZ has a song that, we may add into this, which is a very jaunty thing that was actually composed there at the center. Is that your work, some of your work, not all, I haven't heard your new release, which certainly emphasized that's coming out in January, is your ability to sing a cappella and just all these different aspects. Is that, one of the ways I want to work with you more and more, I hope, that we're both busy, but is the actual sound score of the entire film. So this is taking things from Lucia, this is taking things from DZ, this is taking things from, Alejandro's flutes, all these things, and yourself, may it be so. But, and I also, like in the essence, like take, for example, the kidnapping. And a friend of mine sent me a song, I think called Oscuridad, and he writes composes sort of darker Gothic, trans music. But I loved it because I was like, oh my goddess, this is so perfect underneath that kidnapping scene. It's just this dark chanting thing, where it brings people right into it. On the flip side, I think what we see also in like Envision, which is a festival in Costa Rica, that Costa Rica is very relevant to modern DJ music, like Burning Man, like this style. And I was like, wow, I want things that get people moving and excited in their seat, like your song Alive and your recent song Lightning in the Darkness. Do I have that right?
Living in the night.
In the night. Okay. Do you want to speak to anything like how dance music can be a part of serious documentary film? I think so.
Yeah. I totally think so too. And something that I've realized as I've dived more into being involved in like the dance music scenes and stuff is the music really like can capture like a lot of different emotion in itself too. Like you could make it be the music that makes you just want to move and express yourself. And also there's a lot of like healing and goodness that comes from moving your body to music. And I think a lot of joy and happiness and good stuff that comes from that. And but at the same time, there is some darker influences as well. And I don't know, I think in like a similar way, like hold on, I'm just collecting my thoughts. um I think one of the things that's interesting about a lot of the sounds that we've already collected for the film is you have stuff that pulls more on the cultural roots of Costa Rica, right? With like flutes and traditional music and stuff. But in a similar way, like the culture has also evolved to include big celebrations with dance music and all that. And it feels like it also captures the energy of the place that is being explored in this film. And it would feel weird to not necessarily include that aspect of it, especially since we are both tapped into it, I'd say, and have seen just like the connection that is built through the dance music world, the connection with each other and the connection with our environment and with our inner selves, I'd say as well.
Right. And, in that, I think, in speaking to the relevance and, some people may shun this, but I think part of the development that, I'm participating in as the current executive, whatever, producer and director, acting director and stuff, but is that, from a marketing standpoint, I'm very well aware that in order to reach younger audiences, like I said, I can have the acoustical magic, but a lot of these people who are watching Instagram Reels and, TikTok and all these things, they're going to these festivals. And what are they listening to in their car and their iPods, and what are they responding to? So, in this film, like you said, there's a lot of parts of it that are on the road sort of thing. Like you remember that drive that, you had this taste of going into what I refer to as the outback of Costa Rica, which not most people go there. Like really, that if there's anything you can pat yourself on the back is that you're on that drive, but it is like this moment where you can bring in some of this more current music, I think, to get people in the mood of like, it wasn't all bad. We're on this way to like see that artist Pancho and that crazy restaurant that we saw in the making and went to. Well, he's a designer of art for these electronic festivals. And in turn, I think there's ways that this music gets people kind of just in it, and awake, not like drawn out or like, oh, this is another story or that it's not fun, because I think there are so many ways to keep the velocity of film going. So if, for example, we were able to get permission, that song Lightning in the Night is incredibly relevant to this film, as is the composition Alive. And maybe there'll be other things as we move forward that you'll be able to drop into this film. But I think a lot of times what people forget is like when you walk away from a film, what often can resonate and get people to remember the critical essence of a film or the memory of societal change is the sound score, the soundtrack of the film. And that's what I am really, really emphasizing. I'm 63, you're in your 20s. I think there are ways to celebrate the music, the emotional heartstrings of film in so many ways. So as we begin to wrap this up, what what keeps you excited in trying to work a film sound score and to participate in indie film and to show up in New York City, to help set up and all these different aspects? Any final weavings or blessings you want to say that keeps you interested in these long-term projects that don't pay yet, that may flop somewhere, but what are you getting from this?
I think one of the things that really has kept me super intrigued and interested in the whole process of making this film is that everyone who's been involved is so open to experimenting and seeing what happens and just putting out there like it could be a wild idea, but then we're like, let's see if it works. And there's a lot of play involved and a lot of like trust in each other's creative abilities and what everyone who's involved on the team brings to the table. And so just as an artist, like regardless of like where it goes, it's like you're given an opportunity to be a part of a collective building something that doesn't have any sort of prescription as to what it should be, because we've given ourselves the permission to experiment and play. And I think that's really important, especially in filmmaking, because there's a lot of regimented, like between genres and budgets and this, that, and the other thing. There's a lot of standards for what a film needs to be considered, I don't know, whatever it is, Oscar worthy or whatever. But I think the route that we've decided to take, like we obviously want to make a good film, but I think we're trying to make that in a way that hasn't necessarily been done before. And that is exciting to me.
And the risk taking. And so we're off to New York City, which is our first fundraiser. How does that feel to you to land in New York City with no expectations? But we have a pretty interesting place on the Lower East Side. Just kind of feeling the historical vibe of that place, that location. I think about it a lot, and that, some aspects of New York it's a different kind of bohemia than what I grew up in the late 70s and mid 80s and stuff. But like literally Basquiat's studio was probably 6 or 7 blocks from there. Keith Haring was painting or doing his chalk drawings in the subways. And I remember seeing them even before he was discovered. I remember going to the club, which we can certainly walk by one day, Pyramid Club, when RuPaul was doing his shtick as a crunchy drag queen, and these things. So anything you want to speak to on, how, to go about getting funding for our strange projects and what you would like to see from New York?
I am really excited to see just face to face how the art and the themes that are incorporated into this film are resonating with an audience, right? And maybe it's not as direct as like, here's snippets from the film and here's audience reaction, but I think, with the art that's going to be on display in the gallery, it's the first kind of insight for viewers and an audience to understand the world that we are kind of crafting around. And I think that I'm just really excited to see how people's reactions, how people react to the art, and then what we can take away from that to inform the next kind of part of us making this film, the next era of our creative work.
Awesome. And I'm going to close this out and we'll say goodbye. And here's the cool thing for those of you who do make it into New York, if you want to be a part of a film and you have an ego celebrity oriented thing, we will likely be filming the night of the opening. That, based upon what we get, could be the rollout and closing on the actual feature film. Like, what's the celebration? What's the transformation from trauma and stuff? So how can people find you online, Gracie? A minute.
you can find me on Instagram. It's at Prsephne Music, PRSEPHNE_music. And yeah.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Until we meet again, adios. Brought to you by Jaguar Bridge Productions, angels, guardians, guides, and perhaps a few demons if you're lucky, from the underworld. So tune in to us on all the major social circuits around the universe. Bye-bye.